West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Welcome back. Earlier this hour, we talked about some of the issues surrounding the pandemic and the immense challenges facing Americans, and that topic plays into this next segment as well. The National Urban League is out with its 2021 State of Black America report. The data shows higher rates of unemployment, lower household incomes, and the crushing burden of housing costs left Black Americans uniquely vulnerable to COVID-19's economic fallout. Joining us now, President and CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial. Also with us, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and President of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Professor of the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, MSNBC contributor, Victoria DeFrancesco Soto. Mark, I want to start with the lead lines out of this report, especially pertaining to COVID. The housing crisis really screams out to me, but let's start with actual COVID numbers and then how Black Americans are faring in this report.
Thank you. Good morning, Mika, and good to be with you. We focus in this report not only on what the status of Black America is, but on what we need to build a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive America. So this report talks about the direction we need to take. But let's contextualize it this way. If you combine the Great Recession and COVID resulting economic difficulties, Black America has taken a tremendous hit in the first 20 years of the 21st century when it comes to wealth, income, and especially now coming out of COVID, the disparities that were exposed when it comes to the health of Black Americans. So we come out of this 2020 with tremendous challenges. We know the challenges of voting, the challenges of policing, but the economic challenges are just as stark. The challenges with respect to health are just as stark. In this report, we try to focus on what we can do, what policies, what actions, what solutions are available.
Mr. Mayor, it's Willie Geist. Great to have you on this morning. You were the two-term mayor of the great city of New Orleans. I'm curious for your view and how it fits into this report of this tension we're seeing right now on the real need and the desire for police reform, but also rising crime in our major cities just over the last year. How do you see that playing out, and what are some of the solutions you're looking at?
You know, Willie, there has to be balance between police reform and justice on one hand and public safety. It would be a tragic mistake if, facing the gun violence spike we've seen, that we went back to what took place in the 1980s and 90s. Over-policing, mass incarceration, stop and frisk. No, we need to deal with the underlying causes of gun violence, easy access to guns. We need to take this opportunity now that cities have money from the American Rescue Plan and put young people to work in communities. Let's raise up the largest youth jobs and young adult job initiative in American history. That is something we can do, but you have to have trust between police and communities if you're going to prevent gun violence, and you've got to get off the seat and change the law so that easy access to guns is not the reality across America. So we've got to balance all of these things, Willie. The old solutions will not work. So this is a time for us to speak up and not allow the polarization that occurred in the 1980s and 1990s to dominate the discussion. It is important to do both. And you hear the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, Eric Adams, speaking about something I learned when I was mayor. You have to balance. We put investments in summer jobs, in summer camps, but then we also reform policing to a community policing model. It's got to be balanced. You've got to do both, and you've got to recognize that without doing both, you're going to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Rev Mark brings up the name Eric Adams. You and I were just talking about him, the Democratic nominee and likely next mayor of New York City. Fascinating that in this era of marches and activism about police violence and the need for change and police reform, that New York City just elected a former New York City police officer, perhaps to be its next mayor.
But Eric comes with a balanced resume. He's a former New York City policeman, but he's also one of the founding members of the National Action Network 30 years ago when I started it. So he has been involved on both activism and police reform, the balance that we're talking about. Because I think people forget that the victims of crime in the black community are blacks. So we want to see crime down as much as we want police crime. I think what many Americans do not realize is that it is the height of being frightened when you are in an area that has high crime and you're afraid to call the police because you don't know how they're going to behave when they get there, which is why you need this balance. But Mark, let me address this to you, the question, because you and I have worked together the last decade and a half that you've headed the Urban League. And one of the things that we've looked at is the inequality, whether it be healthcare, whether it be education, things that you come out with your annual report today. And as we met with President Biden last week around voting, I think that part of the challenge that I want you to address is how to get government to understand, since there is this inequality, there must be a disproportionate investment in repairing the damage. You can't give us equal resources and equal attention when we're in an unequal situation.
Rev, you just defined what equity is. And equity means to do what is necessary to bring us to equal. And government played a role in these disparities where hospitals were located, not in black communities. Redlining when it came to housing, discrimination in bank loans, lack of access to colleges and universities. Government policies were a contributing factor to the inequity or the inequality we face. So government has a role and a responsibility to do more, to do the extra, to undo these structural, if you will, inequities that we see. And I think you define it well, that they've got to do more. Now, President Biden's budget plan and his infrastructure plan, I believe, hold promise as an investment, of the beginning of a reverse of what we've seen all too often, for the most part, with the exception of the American Recovery Plan over the last 20 years, which is a systematic continuation of the policies of disinvestment in African-American communities and Latino communities, in urban communities, big and small. And that's why we've got this wide wealth gap. We've got this wide Americans who once considered themselves even middle class, having a hard time paying their mortgage, paying their rent, and basically keeping their head above water. So this is an emergency situation for the nation.
So I'm looking at that graph that was just up about lack of access, computer access. Victoria DeFrancesco Soto from the great University of Texas as a professor. I know this is profoundly of interest to you. And I know you have a question for Mark about just access overall to education as it pertains to Black communities.
I do. Thanks, Mika. And Mark, I really appreciated how you highlighted the fact that what we are seeing in our communities of color is layered on top of the Great Recession, which set our communities back so far, and it took us so long to recover. And then looking at the latest jobs numbers, right, we saw that the U.S. as a whole is at 5.96%. But when you look at Black folk, we're looking at over 9% unemployment. So can you talk to me about what the plan is to regain employment, not just in the short term, trying to get back some of those jobs, which we know are low quality jobs, but how do we set our communities of color on track for medium to long term gain? So we're not just surviving, but we're thriving. What are the tools that we need and that we need to press our government officials to move forward?
So thank you for the question. There's a part of this where I embrace what is fairly conventional thinking. That is that we need to invest more in education and training targeted at communities of color, for better paying jobs in technology, jobs in construction, jobs in careers that have increasing, if you will, levels of income and levels of wages. But in addition to that, corporate America and employers have to look themselves in the mirror and say, we have engaged in systemic discrimination for the most part. You look at the mid-level and higher up jobs in many, many industries, they're not diverse at all. So we've got work to do. So I want to see a real commitment from those who hire to do a more aggressive and assertive job in recruiting and hiring African Americans and other people of color. So that's number two. I think number three is the president's leadership and the leadership of the government in highlighting racial injustice and in holding up racial justice as one of President Biden's operating pillars. I think the moral power, but also the enforcement powers of the EEOC and the Department of Justice have to be in play to purge this nation of this long-standing racism. So there's much we can do. And the idea is, do we have the will to do it?
It is Thursday, the 15th of July of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, we've made it to Thursday, and we still have Blue Moon Spirits Fridays ahead of us, so a lot could happen between now and then, and it always does. Though, now it is, and I'm just a small reminder, I know we're 7 months in to this different year, but it does feel different than it was last year, not just because Donald Trump is no longer president of the United States, but also because, well, actually, I was going to say it's different from the pandemic was last year. And then I started looking at those totals, the infection rates in the last week, and it doesn't look good. But one good thing is that quite a few of us are vaccinated, and if we could just overcome the terrible brainwashing and propaganda and to be anti-vax, this vaccine hesitancy, that's pretty much a polite way of saying that people have been brainwashed. Okay. As we reported yesterday about Tennessee stopping all outreach programs, information programs about every vaccine for every disease, until we can find out what the hell is going on. Yeah, I guess they're going to start tray panning the kids there in Tennessee, right? bleed them to get rid of the humors. We're going to have a Scopes trial. We are going to have a Scopes trial. And it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And guess who's there? Barrett. Oh, boy. Are we in trouble? I guess we won't be going to the courts to find any resolve. Though I will note that Joe Biden is getting some of the lower court vacancies filled, though we do have a story about some Republican recalcitrants on that front. Because, well, once they find out what we're doing, they know exactly what's going on because they're criminals. And they have a criminal mind. And they think everybody's criminal like them. And so that's how we that's how we fake them out. Okay? We're going to use the rule of law, but also representative democracy to take them down. All right, do our thing. Just like an Independence Day. Oh, boy. How do these aliens get to the point where they walk among us? Yeah, well, they're leading us off a cliff. So let's not let them do that. My dear mom has a medical procedure today for, well, gastrointestinal stuff. And she's going to be put out. And then they're going to wake her up. And then we'll go home. But we had to go through a very extensive process that we're still going through now because she goes into this procedure about, shortly after the end of this show. We rush out of here and get to the facility, and then so that's taken up a bit of attention through the morning. And if I seem discombobulated or more discombobulated than usual during this beginning rant, that's my excuse. Okay. Well, I did notice that there's a few things hopping around on the hopper out there in the news hopper. And one, I just love this one. Leaked Kremlin documents suggest Putin holds blackmail leverage over Trump, and that's why Russia backed him. Oh, give me a break. That's news? Everybody knew that when this guy suddenly got elected. How'd that happen? 3 counties. Or was it, 2 counties over 3 states. How'd this work out? There was some number there, but across Pennsylvania and another state. And that was enough electoral votes for Trump to win. He didn't win the popular vote. He was roundly trounced like this last time. Except this time we took all the electoral votes, and he's totally pissed. Like, wait a second. We had gamed this system. And people started voting by mail. We weren't accounting for that because you can't hack a paper ballot. Just can't. So, that's interesting, treating it like news. Well, wasn't that supposed to be in the Mueller report, but they weren't able to go there because of, obstruction by Donald Trump? Yes, that's exactly what happened. So everybody knew at the time the only way that Trump won was with some sort of help from Russia. They only announced that they were doing it, and we only knew that they were. I will add also that if for some reason Hillary had won, all the stuff that we are going through now, we would be going through then, except, I don't know, they might have had a successful storming of the Capitol. Okay? That might be the only difference. Oh, so we have General Miley coming off like Antifa. And I'm not joking. Okay, because, as much as I love Antifa, because they're an amorphous organization with really no titular head, things aren't as well organized as like with the Proud Boys, the 3%ers, the Oath Keepers, constitutional sheriffs, and every other Nazi in America. Those efforts have it all planned out. Okay, they are, Nazis are pretty much social engineers. I mean, they only proved it in Nazi Germany. Boy, They had an engineering mindset with what they were doing then, and it pretty much worked for them until we kicked their ass. Anyway, General Miley might be Antifa for real, because it took 4 hours for any kind of response. I mean, couldn't Miley have sent... I know, posse comitatus. I know. But there were some troops mustered just across the Potomac. All they had to do was get there. All they had to do, they were ready to go. Everybody was in the trucks. Give us the word. So Miley could have put some pressure to bear on the appropriate officials that were holding things up. Like maybe Michael Flynn's brother. We still don't hear about that. And every now and then, I come across a post by the Vindmans. Or Rachel Vindman, the wife. And I think about those brothers. You know, the one brother had truly nothing to do with what Alexander did, except they're brothers, twins. But he got kicked out also for being a patriot in a Nazi regime. A patriot to America in the attempted Nazi takeover of America. And somehow Michael Flynn's brother's still there, and he's like, I don't know, a Zelig. He's always there. Nothing happens. Okay. So, I'm glad that I'm glad that General Miley is coming out and expressing the alarm that they felt at the time. But he did, for some reason, walk down out into Lafayette Square when Trump had the military kick out and violently manhandle peaceful protesters, church people. Kicked him right out. In fact, people from the church that he commandeered manhandled them and kicked him out of the way so he could hold the Bible upside down. Like he's some sort of God on earth. He's not the manifestation or the representation of God on earth. He's actually God on earth. Representation of God. Well, no representation. We are. And that's the kind of person that 70 some odd million people voted for. And now they're all willing to die for him like at Jonestown. There's a story of a guy who did not want to take the vaccine because it might have made Trump look bad. Okay? And here I am arguing that these people don't care about anything but themselves. They can't like understand what it is to do something for a stranger. On the other hand, they think they know Donald Trump, and Donald Trump knows them on a personal basis in their hearts. I have a personal communion with Donald Trump every time I pray. Wow. So that's how religions start. Yes, that's exactly how religions start. As Jim Morrison said, you can either start a religion or plan a murder. It's all the same thing. Jesus. Okay, I got all that in, didn't I? Yes, I did. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here? Because we, of course, have a curated part of the show. What's on the rest of the menu? At the top, the National Urban League released its State of Black America 2021 report, but you just know the GOP will deride it as critical race theory. Because it is. On the rest of the menu. No, it's not. But it addresses a lot of the things that show that there's a really bad systemic issue of race in America. Shocking, isn't it? Yes, it is. On the rest of the menu, Senate Republicans go after the Biden judicial nominee to the U.S. Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Why? Because she opposes voter suppression. She cannot be objective on this Nazi takeover of America. You know what? This is what happens when you don't punch a Nazi. Okay? Just saying. Oh, which reminds me. Even Lynn Cheney punched a Nazi. Jim Jordan came up and said, here, we got to get the little ladies out of the way of the aisle. Give me your hand. I'll guide you. And she slapped him up one side or the other and pretty much tapped him out. Good for Lynn Cheney. But I still wouldn't trust her. A GOP report says that responding to racism and sexual assault in the Navy weakens combat readiness. Because you need those guys all pumped up and ready to rape. And right-wing intellectual heavyweight Senator Tommy Tuberville wonders why trans athletes can't just have a separate but equal team of their own. Tuberville. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the United Kingdom will ban online races from soccer matches after the lawlessness connected to Britain's loss in the Euro 2020 championship. Did you see that? Hooligans. And the Bosnia intelligence chief has been detained in a money laundering scheme. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Of course, thank you, Kelly. If you would then look across the page to the left of that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right there is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you know it helps us tremendously in fulfilling our civic duty as the founders originally intended. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, that helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and fulfill our civic duty by making sure this Nazi takeover of America is successful, because they keep trying. Okay, every 70 years or so. We got to stop it. Stop it. And thank you for allowing us, once again, to fulfill our civic duty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I take care of me, because there's no one left. No, what? And who am I on Twitter? I am at Justice Putnam. That's really me, indeed. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted up on Twitter for your show notes and links. Well, salon pleasure here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because that's what we are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, because they're everywhere. Deezer's a podcast platform. Check it out. They're all there. Okay, let's tuck in to this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because we do have the chef's table. Little tidbits, a morsel, and amuse-bouche to send you on your way in this lovely Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. This first offering comes out of the American Independent by Emily Singer. Senate Republicans yesterday, Wednesday, came out against President Joe Biden's nominee for a seat on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, criticizing her support for voting rights and advocacy against the type of voter suppression tactics Republican lawmakers across the country have sought to implement. I keep saying you don't negotiate with terrorists, and you certainly don't allow them in the halls of Congress. That's just me. They got rid of commies. I hold in my hand a blank sheet of all the commies in the State Department. They kicked them all out. Real people, even though there was nothing on the sheet of paper. We could actually have sheets of paper, reams. Boxes upon boxes of reams and reams of paper of all the Nazis in government. We have the proof. Do we have the will? Well, I hope so. Someday. Perez is currently... The senator said during a judiciary hearing on the nomination of Myrna Perez that she would not be able to rule impartially on voting rights issues if she were seated on the court. Because that's how it is in America. We are all on the side of representative democracy, and those who aren't are called Nazis. Nazis don't like representative democracy. They hate America. Perez is currently on leave from her role as the director of the Brennan Center for Justice's Voting Rights and Elections Project. Oh my God. Where she analyzed and criticized voter suppression laws that have been passed by GOP-controlled state legislatures in the wake of Trump's loss of the 2020 presidential election. So I suppose the insurgency continues. Yes, it does. Cruz took issue with Perez's advocacy against voter suppression laws.
You have waged litigation campaigns and opposed voter ID laws. You have opposed voter integrity laws. You have opposed prohibitions on ballot harvesting. You have advocated for felons being able to vote, Cruz said, calling her a radical activist. Really? Senator Marsha Blackburn, oh my God, said she didn't believe Perez could be neutral, saying Myrna Perez is too busy being an activist to concentrate on being a Second Circuit judge. Blackburn tweeted sharing a video of her questioning of Perez. Perez responded, "In the great genius of our Constitution, people play different roles according to the Hill newspaper. Advocates zealously argue on behalf of their clients in as many forms as they can. I had the privilege and pleasure of doing that." Democrats and voting rights group responded to the Judiciary Committee Republicans as well. Senator Ted Cruz claims that Myrna Perez is a radical activist because of her advocacy for the right to vote. Guaranteeing access to the polls is anything but radical, but we need judges with civil rights experience like Perez on our courts, the Alliance for Justice tweeted, urging Perez's confirmation. I have no affiliation with the Alliance of Justice, but I'm all for it. The NAACP's Legal Defense Fund also tweeted support for Perez, writing, "Federal judges play vital roles in preserving constitutional democracy. It is critical that judges have a demonstrated commitment to fairness and the rule of law. Myrna Perez has dedicated her career to strengthening and protecting voting rights and our democracy. And the Nazi Republicans say that that is a bad thing." That was in this reporter's opinion, of course, but it's really a fact. Senate Democrats are taking advantage of their slim majority in the chamber to prioritize the confirmation of Biden's judicial nominees, since Mitch McConnell packed the courts with all those Federalist Society judges up and down. Even Dogcatcher Judge is a Federalist Society judge now. The pace at which they are confirming his court picks is faster than any president in the last 50 years, thank God. To date, 7 of Biden's judicial nominees have been confirmed, more than the 2 judges Trump had confirmed at this same point in his term. Republicans have yet to block one of Biden's judicial nominees, who have been far more diverse than Trump's picks because they were all white guys. Frat boys. Give them a case of beer. They'll rule however you want. If Perez is confirmed, she'll be the only Latina to serve on the Second Court of Appeals, and the first since then Circuit Judge Sonia Sotomayor was confirmed to a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court in 2009.
of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republican lawmakers are pointing to a report released on Monday to suggest that the U.S. Navy under President Joe Biden is too focused on combating racism and sexual assault to be effective. The 22-page document called A Report on the Fighting Culture of the United States Navy Surface Fleet was released by Senator Tom Cotton, Republican Nazi of Arkansas, and GOP reps Mike Gallagher and Jim Banks and Dan Crenshaw, the one-eyed goon from Texas. The first page of the report says that it was written by 2 retired military officers and conducted at the direction of the 4 lawmakers. Was one of those retired military officers One-Eyed Dan? The report's executive summary calls it a strictly nonpartisan exercise in congressional oversight. Most of the fewer than 100 interviews conducted for the study took place under the Trump administration. Yeah, where they had Fox News on all the time. Any brainwashing going on in the troops? You wonder. In a press release announcing the report, the lawmakers presented their work as proof that the U.S. Navy is not adequately training its sailors to win battles. A strong Navy is critical to our national security interests around the world, Crenshaw said. The findings clearly indicate that our sailors are not receiving the training they need to perform the essential functions of the Navy, to find and sink enemy fleets, and ensure freedom of navigation. Wow, freedom of mobility? Thank you, buddy. That would be nice. Oh, let me just say, when I make some sort of mocking reference to Dan Crenshaw wearing an eye patch, it's only because he plays it up all the time. It's a shtick for him. It's sad that he has to have one, but hey, you F around, you'll find out. The report says that the reason for the distraction, in part, is a corrosive over-response to media culture and non-essential training to address diversity and sexual assault prevention. Yeah, coming from an officer corps that has been going to court for how many decades? For what? Sexual assault. Casey Quinlan of the American Independent brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A U.S. senator who has repeatedly challenged transgender equality recently proposed the idea that transgender students compete on a team of their own rather than with those of the same gender. During a hearing on Tuesday for Catherine Lamont, President Joe Biden's nominee to lead the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Education, Tommy Tuberville asked whether transgender athletes couldn't have their own separate team instead of playing on the team of their gender. Lamont previously worked in the same position for which she is now being considered while under the Obama administration. During her time in that role, the administration released a Dear Colleague letter that provided schools with guidance on issues of transgender equality. The letter stated that when a school provides sex-segregated activities and facilities, transgender students must be allowed to participate in such activities and access such facilities consistent with their gender identity. The Trump administration dished those protections in 2017, but the Biden administration has since rolled out numerous executive orders, memorandums, and proposed rules to fight anti-trans discrimination, including discrimination against transgender youth in education. Tuberville claimed that the Obama administration had changed a couple processes during Lehman's time there, suggesting that as a result he was getting complaints from constituents about this transgender problem. Now we're letting transgender athletes involved dressing in the same dressing rooms, using the same restrooms. That's gotta be an answer to this, he said. Given your record, Ms. Lehman, do you believe that allowing transgender women to compete in women's sports should come at the cost of discrimination against biological women? Lehman responded, the promise of Title IX is that no one person shall be subject to discrimination on the basis of sex. So I would not countenance discriminating against any student in the context of Title IX if I were enforcing Title IX. It protects everyone. Of course, Tuberville doesn't like that, and I would argue Tuberville doesn't even know what the hell she's talking about. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Suddenly Soderbergh. So what sticks in my head to say about No Sudden Move, Steven Soderbergh's latest film, is that, refreshingly, it feels like a movie. And that's probably for two reasons. One, No Sudden Move squarely comes from a classic Hollywood tradition, film noir. Kirk Goins is a mid-level crook in 1954 Detroit. He's fresh out of jail when a mystery boss hires him into a three-man crew. Their job is to hold hostage the family of an auto exec who's planning some industrial espionage. The new plan is this guy must now do his espionage for the benefit of whomever it is Goins and crew are working for. Plans go awry, hidden motives are revealed, people are betrayed, and Goins, followed by fellow crook Ronald Russo, must work out how to stay alive and how to score the elusive big payday. Antiheroes, a corrupt world, twists and turns, a MacGuffin, a money hunt, film noir. 2. Soderbergh, like many other directors I admire, makes consistent stylistic choices in his films. Let's talk about two of them: character focus and complex plots. By design, Soderbergh and screenwriter Ed Solomon do not give you everything you need to know up front. You pick up facts as the film progresses. In fact, in a very real way, you don't learn what's driving No Sudden Move until the postscript. The postscript! That tight control of information puts us close to the characters, and what actors we have playing these characters. Benicio del Toro, David Harbour, John Hamm, plus another half-dozen names, and anchoring the film, Don Cheadle. Cast to play to their strengths as opposed to just playing their types, these stars get to stretch their acting chops a bit. Now, all the main women characters are either girlfriends or wives, but that's another 2 minutes. Yeah, so my whole it feels like a movie thing probably says more about my biases than anything else, but also it's because No Sudden Move is just visually rich and conceptually interesting with good writing and strong performances. Isn't that what you want a movie to be? This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Can a high school punish a student for criticizing the school on Snapchat? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. At a high school in Pennsylvania, a ninth grader, identified in the recent Supreme Court decision as BL, didn't make the varsity cheerleading squad, and in the words of the court, did not accept that decision with good grace. More specifically, BL posted to her Snapchat friends group an image of herself and a friend giving a middle finger salute with the caption, "F*** school, f*** softball, f*** cheer, f*** everything." The image was brought to the attention of the school authorities, who punished her, suspending her from the JV cheerleading squad for a year. The student apologized, but to no avail. The punishment stood until the student sued in federal district court and won at the Court of Appeals, and at the end of June won her freedom of speech case at the Supreme Court as well. The High Court ruled that the school's interest in teaching good manners did not overcome the student's interest in free expression, emphasizing that the speech caused minimal disruption to teaching, learning, and school activities, and that the school has an important interest in protecting a student's unpopular expression, especially when the expression takes place off campus. The 8-1 majority opinion, written by Justice Breyer, intentionally does not answer all the questions of when off-campus speech might not be protected, but made clear that in this instance, it clearly was a good and clear victory for freedom of speech. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Most people believe the American economy is rigged by and for bankers, CEOs, and other super-rich elites because it is. With their hired armies of lawmakers, lobbyists, lawyers, and the like, they fix the economic rules so ever more of society's money and power flows uphill to them. Take corporate CEOs. While 2020 was somewhere between a downer and devastating for most people, the CEO class made out like bandits, with each of the 3 top-paid corporate honchos pocketing as much as $1 billion in personal pay. Are they geniuses or what? What? All 3 of their corporations ended 2020 with big financial losses and declining value. So how can such mediocrity produce such lavish rewards? Simple. Rig the pay machine. Today's corporate system of setting compensation for top executives is a flim-flam disguised as a model of management rectitude. On its face, it sounds good. Pay for performance, it's called, meaning the CEO does well if the company does well. But who defines doing well? The scam at most major corporations is that the standard of corporate performance that the chief must meet to qualify for a huge payday is set by each corporation's board of directors. Guess who they are? Commonly, board members are the CEO's hand-picked brothers-in-law, golfing buddies, and corporate cronies. So they set the bar for winning multi-million-dollar executive paychecks so low that a sack of concrete could jump over it. This is Jim Hightower saying, well, can't corporate shareholders just vote no on any executive excess? Yes, but corporate rules decree that votes by shareholders are merely advisory, meaning top executives can ignore them, grab the money, and run. The system is fixed, and we need to break it. Howdy ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1959. That was the day 500,000 steelworkers walked off the job in a historic 116-day strike in defense of work rules. It was the largest industry-wide strike. It was also the last. The strike affected 12 steel companies and shut down more than 85% of steel production. Mill owners refused to grant wage increases unless the union agreed to changes in the contract. Specifically, they were looking to eliminate Section 2B, titled Local Working Conditions. The bosses wanted the ability to change the number of workers assigned to any given task. They also wanted to introduce new machinery and rules that would reduce labor hours and cut the workforce. United Steelworker members understood this as an assault on workplace safety and a move to break the union. Mill bosses hoped that a long strike would provoke the membership to abandon their union. But according to Jack Metzger, author of Striking Steel, members had grown used to walkouts every 3 years and planned accordingly. As well, the United Steelworkers had a well-oiled machinery, including an internal welfare system for hardship cases, and also reached out to merchants, banks, charitable agencies, and local and state governments to organize relief. By the end of August, the Department of Defense stoked anxieties that national security was at risk. 3 months into the strike, union funds dwindled and strikers felt the pinch. President Eisenhower invoked a Taft-Hartley injunction, hoping to force strikers back to work. As the union rose to challenge Taft-Hartley's constitutionality, solidarity among the mill owners crumbled. Kaiser Steel broke ranks and settled separately. Their contract granted wage increases and preserved Section 2B, which set the precedent for the contract that was eventually signed industry-wide.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 88. Which is considerably cooler in the forecast than we have gotten. We'll see if it does indeed get as cool. Sunny conditions throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. With mainly sunny skies tomorrow, highs around 87, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have increased once again and are at 118,056 confirmed cases. Deceased remained confirmed at 148. Grass pollen is really high outside the window here in Rogue River. Boy, can I attest to that. The air quality index is good at 39 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.01 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 72%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations and a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 70 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 77 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 93 and fair. Kabul is 84 and fair. Hong Kong is 82 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 80 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 and clear. San Francisco, California is 51 and cloudy. And New York, New York is 85 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Danica Kirka of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the government plans to ban anyone guilty of online racist abuse from soccer matches as authorities continue to respond to the lawlessness connected to England's loss in the final of the European Soccer Championship. Johnson told lawmakers that it was time to act after 3 black members of England's national team were targeted by racist abuse on social media after they failed to score during the penalty shootout that sealed the team's loss to Italy on Sunday night. The government plans to add online racism to the list of offenses for which fans can be barred from matches. Courts are allowed to issue banning orders if a fan is convicted of a relevant offense linked to a match, including crimes such as disorderly behavior or possession of weapons.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bosnia authorities have detained the head of the Balkan country's state security agency in a probe that includes money laundering. Police detained Osman Mehmedic, the head of the intelligence security agency, for questioning. Mehmedic is under suspicion of abusive position, falsifying of personal identification documents, and money laundering, the statement added. No other details were immediately available. Authorities last year charged Mehmedic with abuse of power for allegedly using agency resources to spy on a man who filed a criminal complaint against him. Legal proceedings often take years in the corruption-plagued Balkan nation, which is still struggling to recover from the devastating war in 1992 to 1995. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.